Right, okay, well, thank you for joining us at Onward's last panel event of this party conference. Save the best for last, and well done for finding us as well. My name is Francesca Fraser. I'm a senior researcher at Onward, and I lead all our education skills work. And Onward is a think tank which was set up almost sort of 5 years ago now to strengthen opportunity and communities across the UK. And today we are going to be talking about apprenticeships and how we can get apprenticeships to the areas and the people that actually need them most and could benefit from them most. And this is vitally, vitally important at the moment. We are facing a sort of workforce challenge with technological advances. We know there's going to be a huge skills gap with what skills people have in the economy and the skills we need. And they're also a vital pathway for school leavers, people who don't want to go to university. They can earn a living while they do it, and it's growing a lot, but we need to do more. Because we need to be able to communicate the benefits of apprenticeships to employers, but also to learners when they're thinking about what their next steps might be, and it's often not always that easy. We need to make it easy for employers to invest in the right kind of training, to champion social mobility. We need to make sure policymakers are getting the incentives right. The Apprenticeship Levy, there was talk of it being reviewed. Hopefully there might be something around that. But we also need to make the system easy and practical to work with. Lots of employers say they want to hire an apprentice, but it's just too difficult. And the role of policymakers needs to be to meet them in the middle to get that working. And we are delighted to have an amazing panel here today. So we are going to first hear from Richard Holden, MP for North West Durham, new PPS at Trade as well, and chair of the APPG for apprenticeships, I believe.
Co-chair.
Co-chair, there we go. And we are next going to hear from Sonia Clark from, she is the Policy and Public Affairs lead at Multiverse. I am sure you will know Multiverse, but since they have set up, they've trained over 5,000 apprentices with more than 200 employers. Next we are going to hear from Michaela Mead, who is going to be here very shortly. She's the Government Affairs and Public Policy Manager at Google, and they've been leading the way in lots of the digital skills that we're going to be talking about. And lastly, delighted to have her here, the Minister, Andrea Jenkins. No, not at all. Minister for Skills, Higher and Further Education, and really look forward to talking with her about some of these apprenticeship reforms and what her vision is. We only have an hour for this event, so I'm going to be quiet and hand over to Richard, and please get your questions ready at the same time as well.
Thank you very much. And thanks for inviting us along today, Francesca. This is one of the few policy areas which I'm, as a PPS, you can take on a few bits and pieces in addition to your sort of main role supporting ministers, and this is one of the ones I'm particularly keen on keeping going on, because I think this is so fundamental to so much of the future of the country. And I just want to say one of the reasons why my constituency, like a lot of other parts of the country, the routes through higher education as a sort of way out has been the way that people have left communities like mine, like the towns and villages of North West Durham. And I'm really keen, wherever possible, that people don't have to progress by basically leaving where they're from. And I was particularly struck when I became a new MP, when I started working with my local FE college, Derwentide College, about just how fantastic they were at working with local business to start training people. And it was something I'd not seen done as well in all my time in government, and even when I was a SPAD in the Department of Education, because they're just so interlinked with the needs of the local community. And it reminded me of, when I first met them, it reminded me of a visit I did as a SPAD with the Education Secretary to a sixth form college in Kendal, which I spoke about earlier today as well. And that sixth form college, which also did level 4 and level 5, again really rooted in the local community, was having real problems keeping those level 4 and 5 students on, because they were being sold university undergraduate degrees in other parts of the country as a sort of way up for them. And then we're doing these 3-year degrees in subjects which didn't actually help them. Then we're going back home, basically laden with essentially an extra tax, a graduate levy, student loans, however you want to view it in which they would never repay, they would basically leave the taxpayer with an enormous debt, and then going back to do work with those local employers to do those level 4 and 5 qualifications they probably should have been doing in the first place. And I think a lot of it came down to, and why they were doing that was around an element of prestige. And I think one of the best things that we've seen in the last few years, and I'm sure some of the other panellists will speak about this, is actually transforming the idea of apprenticeships for those young people in my constituency and other parts of the country, and the prestige around them. And I think they can do that in a number of different ways, but I think one of the most important drivers has been degree of apprenticeships as the sort of gold standard of them, where people can earn and learn at the same time and work for some of the biggest and best companies in the country. And I think actually if you really want to drive apprenticeship take-up across the entire piece at all levels, you need to have those prestige ones which people can really see as a route. Because I think for too long they've been seen as things for other people's children. I know my youngest brother basically went to university because his two big brothers went to university. Not because it was necessarily the right route for him, but he felt that he had to. He felt it was the only real option for him to get on and progress. And I want to move away from that and have something much broader, which actually reflects the individual talents in society. And I think actually, if you're going to basically ensure that they're there for those who need them and for those who are the right routes, they have to also be seen as a prestige offer. Importantly as well. I think on looking also at those who probably really do need them in terms of maybe level 2, people who've not done that well in school and don't have level 2 or route to a level 3, I think there's also that there is an issue there as well. I've got one of the nicest things about my constituency is that we've got, despite having the former Constant Steel Works, we had massive unemployment in the 1980s, 40% in some of my towns. What we've seen since then, actually, with local college doing very well, is real tie-ups with local employers. The area we still have an issue with is some young people, and it's higher than the national average, although overall unemployment rate's low. For young people, it's higher. And those routes, when they are in school, particularly secondary school, what do they do as soon as they will often be kicked out of mainstream, and there's no route for them, often until they sort of eventually find their feet in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're sort of forced into something, or they move away. And I think we have to also look more sensibly, I think, in parts of the education system, at a proportion of young people who are probably never going to really hit those formal qualifications when they're young. I remember looking at in Holland, I think they're the sort of top in getting those equivalent the old grade C at English, Maths, GCSE, and even they don't get 15% of their young people to that level. So you've still got, that's tens of thousands of young people a year across the country, and who might never, maybe they can do functional skills, but the idea that you're getting 100% is just for the birds. And trying to drive those young people again and again and again and again to those, to try and get those qualifications, I'm not sure is right either. So I think with a prestige offer on the top end, but also a broader offer for others who might not be ready or just might not have the aptitude or drive to do those higher qualifications, I think we also need to have a clear route there. And because I have a real issue with that provision for those young people in places like North West Durham. And I think a broader thing around the levy has obviously been debated and kicked around now for years. I think there's reform is obviously needed there. I look forward to, don't put words in the minister's mouth, maybe she could give us a little bit of an update about how we're going on that. But I think that's just such an important way of going to help transform it, because it gives us a clear route to enable to work with business and to link them in. But I just want to say overall that I think we've seen a huge transformation in the sector. I think T-levels can be a great route for those higher level apprenticeships, and I hope that's what we'll see. And what I don't want to see is what we saw in universities, where basically so many of those university courses were created for the university to prosper rather than for the people to prosper. So many of those university courses aren't linked into business or the wider local economy, or even sometimes the national economy. And I think apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships as well offer us a route through that. And I think particularly with apprenticeships, where you can do steps, you can go in level 3, level 4, level 5. You can do those at different stages. I think it gives you a great route through.
Brill, thank you so much, and a brilliant start. So we heard about some of the demand for apprenticeships from young people. I want to turn to Donia and maybe touch on the actually supply, how we get more businesses offering it as well, because we do need to sort of do the two things at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Francesca. Thank you for having me. I'm Donia. I'm the Policy and Public Affairs Lead at Multiverse. So we have more than 8,000 apprentices and work with more than 500 clients, and they're ranging all across Britain and also the US recently, where we've expanded. So that's led us to have a perspective on apprenticeships and what we think would be beneficial to have reform from the apprenticeship perspective. So since the introduction of the levy, one thing that we've seen is that there's been a massive increase in the quality of apprenticeships, the prestige of apprenticeships, and also the type of apprenticeships that are being delivered, such as in digital skills and sort of the industries that may not have been served by apprenticeships previously. But there's one big problem with apprenticeships, and that's availability. There aren't enough apprenticeships, and they aren't available to the people that need them the most. And this is a big problem because we're facing a skill shortage. Skills are the engine of growth, and it's one of the key levers that the government can access to make sure that people are getting the right skills and getting the high wage, high growth jobs that they may need to prosper in the future. So what are the solutions to this problem? We've identified 3 main solutions that could be used to address some of these issues around availability. And the first is to remove barriers for people who are trying to access apprenticeships. The second is working with SMEs and increasing availability of apprenticeships to SMEs. And lastly, creating more opportunities for apprenticeships through incentivization. But before I go into some of those solutions, I wanted to touch on why we think apprenticeships are the answer to the questions of the skills shortage in general. So as you all know, the nature of work is changing. We're seeing rapid technological advancement. We're also seeing that there's lots of shift in the way people are working from home, working remotely. So that's led to a sort of looking at the way that the skills system works and whether it's actually working for the people who are benefiting from the skills system, but also employers who are taking the advantage of the skills system. Currently, today, there's been an education system where people are encouraged to take 3 years of university and then start their career and perhaps do some training throughout, but not necessarily do consistent training throughout their career that matches with what they're aspiring to and any sort of upskilling or reskilling hopes that they may have. We're also facing a cost of living crisis, so a lot of people are not necessarily able or willing to take on the debt of university or higher education, or may not be able to take time out of work to sort of think about education again. So that's why we think apprenticeships is the solution. But as I mentioned before, availability is a key issue, particularly in areas across the UK which have some issues with apprenticeship availability. In particular, the Northeast has seen a 26% drop in apprenticeship availability, so that's something that's quite concerning. But that's not because there isn't demand for apprenticeships. We see a lot of high-growth tech companies in the area calling out for apprenticeships and calling out for greater skills. So essentially, what we would like to see is the proliferation of opportunity for apprenticeships amongst people and businesses all across England. So going back to some of the recommendations I made, firstly, as I said, we want to make it as easy as possible for people to get apprenticeships. One of the things that we think would really reduce a barrier into apprenticeship is removing the requirement for functional skills to complete an apprenticeship. So for those of you that might not be familiar, in order for an apprentice to get their qualification, they also need to prove that they have level 2 English and maths qualifications and standards. Now we completely understand why this is a priority, particularly because functional skills are very important to individuals, but we're seeing this requirement as a direct barrier to people starting apprenticeships. Some research that we conducted earlier this year showed that people from the most deprived areas of England are the ones that are getting rejected from apprenticeship opportunities because they don't have level 2 English and maths. And on the flip side, people who are already in work and hoping to upskill or reskill, those over 40 are getting rejected at a higher level as well. Now, we think these two groups of people are actually the main groups of people we think could benefit from an apprenticeship. So we would like to see a situation where that requirement is removed, because we truly believe that having a level 3, a level 4, or even a degree apprenticeship is sufficient evidence that you have the right functional skills to thrive in the workplace. The second area that we think could benefit from is SMEs and the focus on how to get more skills to SMEs. Now, SMEs have a huge impact in the UK, having 50% of turnover and 3/5 of employment. And there are mechanisms for SMEs to access and benefit from apprenticeships. In particular, there's a 5% co-investment fee where SMEs pay 5% and the government pays 95%. Or they can benefit from levy transfers where larger organizations transfer a portion of their levy. But we're seeing in our conversations with SMEs that the co-investment is often a difficult barrier, particularly for high-level tech apprenticeships where the co-investment fee can be £1,000 or £1,500. And at a time like this, a lot of organizations don't have the budget to meet that. And from the levy transfer perspective, we are meeting a lot of businesses that are maxing out their levy transfer limit and have transferred as much as they can. And again, for £15,000 apprenticeships, that they go to a certain level. So we are also calling for an increase in the levy transfer limit to be 50% so that more SMEs and charities can benefit from levy transfers and organizations are able to support their supply chain and their ecosystem a bit better. And lastly, I'd like to touch on incentivization. So during COVID, we saw the government create a scheme where organizations would be given a £3,000 incentive if they hired an apprentice. And that led to a huge amount of growth in apprenticeship starts, 200,000 to be exact. So it's really clear that incentivization works to get companies to think about apprenticeships in a positive way. So we would recommend that there would be a Class 1 national insurance waiver in order to incentivize businesses to invest in apprenticeships. So we did some calculations. We got our calculator out, and we saw that this would cost the government £400 million. But a recent report by the government showed that every £1 invested in apprenticeships led to £28 in return. So this £400 million investment could return £11 billion to the economy. So we think it's really, really worthwhile to consider how we can incentivize more companies to hire apprentices. So those are our 3 recommendations. We just wanted to really reiterate that we think apprenticeships absolutely are the solution to unlocking growth. And we really look forward to hearing what the panel has to say about that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, and such a brilliant explanation of some of the things that are holding back apprenticeships, some of the solutions to it. I can see the Minister sort of scribbling away as you're speaking, so we really value having your input. Michaela, welcome, and over to you.
Hello, and apologies for being late. I was speaking with the Apprentices Trust about jobs. So I just thought I would give a little bit of an overview in terms of Google and apprenticeships and how it kind of fits in with our kind of wider mission. Google's mission is to organise the world's information and make it universally useful. And so we believe that if we're not enabling people to be part of the increasing the digital economy and people are left behind by that, we're failing in our mission. So apprenticeships at Google are part of the package of digital skills training that we offer. Within Google at the moment we have 3 programs. We have digital marketing, for which Multiverse are our partners on. We have infrastructure, technology, and we have software development, and they run either 12 months to 18 months. And part of that recruitment is specifically designed as targeted towards underrepresented groups as well. Last year, 99% of our apprentices went on to either further education, training, employment with us, or employment within the sector. And we see our training route with apprenticeships as a training ground, so that we see it's such a success if they get a job with us, but also if they get a job somewhere else within the sector, and then they might come back to us afterwards and having a bit more experience there. We also run other training programs such as the Google Digital Garage, which is free digital skills training for adults. Since we launched that in 2015, we've trained over 800,000 people. And we also have a new Google Career Certificates, which is different from an apprenticeship program, where you can do it online and get those job-ready skills for project management, UX design, data analytics, and digital marketing and IT support. So we see the apprentices as part of a wider package of some of the digital skills training that we offer at Google, and we're trying to make that as accessible as possible. I have a new exciting project that we've been doing in the West Midlands, and I do have a bit of an ask. In that this year we've supported the BBC in their, we've used our apprenticeship levy transfer. We've transferred over £600,000 to fund 50 apprentices within the West Midlands within creative SMEs, and that's being run by the BBC. It's a kind of kind of UK leading, and it would be fantastic that if you knew a creative SME within the West Midlands, please do send them our way, that might want an apprentice within their team, because there is a fantastic team at the BBC doing that. I thought perhaps I'll leave it there and then very happy to take questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Claire. And over to you, Minister. You've been in the role for a couple of months now.
Yes.
And we'd love to hear about your sort of visions for apprenticeships and addressing some of the questions that we've had here on lower numbers and how we can boost uptake.
I'm interested first. Michaela, have you got a Google phone?
That's mine.
Yes.
Yes, I know you have, yeah. She's hiding it away, though. We want to see the proof. Well, I mean, first of all, I know that some of the media in here this is hot off the press. This week we just announced it's our first prisoner apprenticeships, and I've got confirmation of this about an hour ago, and this week of prisoners will actually be training with Green King, James Cobbler, and the Kia Group, which I think is fantastic. I think this is an excellent way to break that the cycle of reoffending, and it also helps to boost our skills needs. So I think that's quite an exciting way. I'm very much behind reform because we've seen it's such a high. When you look at, I know I'm going off a slight tangent, but when we look at those in prison, it's quite often care leavers, those who are from deprived backgrounds, and I think giving them an opportunity to really reform their life, I think this is great news. Now, we have got good news on apprenticeships since 2010, without a doubt. We know since lockdown it really did, it didn't pause it, but it really slowed things down, because I think businesses, especially, they want to show how the economy was going to be coming out of lockdown, etc. There wasn't necessarily investing in those areas, so they slightly lost confidence really to invest in those areas because of external circumstances. Now, I agree with what Dania, is it?
Yeah.
Donia and Richard said, and those who's been to the previous events yesterday on similar topics would have heard me say the same. It is about the prestige. And I've repeated myself here, but it's some new people in the audience. I've always got frustrated about the snobbery regarding the academic routes, really, and tend to look down on those more technical vocational qualifications. And I think really we've actually got to change the PR of them, not only with parents, but with teachers at schools, with academia and society in general, because it is a great way. And I think we also need to understand people's learning styles, are they visual, are they auditory, are they kinesthetic? I prefer the kinesthetic doing, so an apprenticeship, would have been great for me as I was a school leaver. So back to the prestige though, the stars in, we've how many times, my dad was a madcap inventor, how many times have we seen people who didn't do the traditional degree route and they've done amazing things, and I think we need to promote this entrepreneurial spirit really at a young age as well. Now, what I think we need to do is clearly the skills gaps, and what I'm very much behind is apprenticeships definitely business led, and we've gone a long way to ensure that is. but we also must ensure that we look at new emerging businesses, new emerging technologies, and we engage them early on in the business cycle to make sure we're really upskilling our economy for the future. I think that's a key part for me as well, so that our young people are learning the skills for tomorrow. Another area regarding regional skills, I'd love to visit your college, Richard, actually.
I can't wait.
You have to give me the name of it again. Yeah.
So, well, honestly,
Yeah.
Minister, I had Alex Burghardt up there last year, so I'd be delighted to have you up this year.
Always great to sort of visit places where, they are doing a great job, which we can share the best practice. But another thing that really interests me is how do we know that with mayoral combined authorities, local government, quite often the money's not ring-fenced, it's not targeted. So to me, how can we actually upskill our economy and look at regional variations if we don't actually look at this? Our local authorities, our mayors actually, doing justice to the skills agenda. So I think that is we need to see some transparency really at where the money's being spent. We don't want it spent for political reasons if it's not ring-fenced. We want it to go to the skills, what's really needed in that area. I mean, I met with a business earlier. I had a meeting with a business who is a fashion manufacturer, and he was actually saying to me, I mean, he mentioned Apprenticeship Levy, and he actually mentioned, do we actually look in some of the benefits of businesses through R&D as a route to be able to fund apprenticeships? So I'm all for actually looking at, how can we improve the Apprenticeship Levy or just slightly tweak it to make it work even more. So I'm all ears if people's got some suggestions on this. But what he was saying to me was that there's so many degrees out there for the fashion industry, as in fashion design, but very little jobs. But he finds it hard to get people with the skills needed to go into fashion manufacturing. And really, I'm a Brexiteer, as a few people might know, as Richard is too. So these post-Brexit opportunities, I think it's important. We should have these skills within our UK economy, and so it's vital that we train our workforce. As part of my brief, I will be really trying to hone down on, where are the skills gaps? Where are the skills gaps of tomorrow? I've got a question for you actually. I was quite surprised. I mean, Google, the Google Garage thing is amazing. And have you had one in your area yet, Richard?
No,
you've got to do it. It's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
We'll be
have
coming
one
to a
next
town near you.
But just a question for
More
Michaela is why did you choose the NHS to do your levy transfer? Because they're a big organisation anyway, which is taxpayer funded. Why not give it to the small SMEs?
The BBC.
Sorry, I meant the BBC.
Yes.
The BBC.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
So they came to us with the proposal.
Okay.
They said,
well, I guess they would, because they want more money.
We're going to
Yes.
come up with this scheme. We're going to do it in the West Midlands.
Okay.
It's on creative SMEs. It ticks the boxes for us in terms of levy transfer. We also do levy transfer with Multiverse, and we also do that with Media Trust as well.
Yeah, no. Well, can I ask that you also reach out to the small SMEs, because they're the ones who really do struggle. So for a big company.
Let's definitely have a conversation about that.
That'd be
something
brilliant.
I can't announce. But
No, that's wonderful. If we can get big companies behind the little SMEs.
Thank you so much.
Because I think the small SMEs, I mean, my dad had a small business, I've had a small business before. They can learn a lot from big organisations, and I'd love to see stronger partnership and mentoring in that area. Now, regarding Dania's point, I think I've pronounced it wrong again, haven't I? Yes. On literacy and numeracy, I have to disagree on that, because we've gone backwards as a country on literacy and numeracy. And so I think if we didn't have that element, we could take our eye off the ball, especially with adult apprenticeships as well. So that's one thing I wouldn't necessarily like to, loosen the ties on, if I'm honest with you. But I would like to see, I mentioned yesterday, I'd like to see apprenticeships on nursing. I mean, I spoke to people in that, I was speaking to a couple of people from the BMA yesterday and say, look, why are we having degrees for nursing? Why can't we start off at apprenticeship level? They might not be able to go for the high level grade of nurse first, but it's a foot in the door into the NHS, into that healthcare. You know, why can't we even look at routes with that? I mean, we've seen as well that dentistry, you know, I mean, you could start off as some, I don't know the dentistry, is there any dentists in the room? No?
Small pool.
Yes, absolutely. We've, as Richard will know, and probably everybody in the audience will know, it's very hard to get a dentist appointment, isn't it? So we need more dentists. And what actually can we do, whether it's T-level, whether it's apprenticeships, what can we do to actually get the next generation of dentists you know, being trained up as well? So, I mean, I'd like to sort of finish really on a quote from Apprentice in my office. I've had 2 apprentices in my office. Brandon, he went on to decide to go on to university then, and he's got a very good job now. But Dominic, now I asked him for a quote for today, and his honestly is a real gem, and he's amazing. And he said to me, being an apprentice, working for me, you know, myself, means that you're accepted in the team, you learn on the job while getting qualifications. To me, this is the important bit, to me that makes it easier, as academic studies are something sometimes of a struggle for me. You know, he found schooling even a struggle. So this was a great route for him. Whereas being an apprentice, you are working and learning. It doesn't just teach you, but it helps you adapt to everyday working life. He said, I was proud to be given this opportunity, and he feels he's come a long way from where he started. And so I just think that it's such a great social mobility lever, and you know, I think it's something that whatever level of government, whatever business, whether it's an SME or large corporation, it's something we must get behind.
Brilliant, thank you so much. If it's right, I might start and press you on this question of SMEs, because
Yes.
some of the research that we've done has found you know, the fall in apprenticeship starts is really closely associated with SMEs struggling to hire apprentices. They're also more likely to hire young apprentices and outside of sort of London and the southeast. So I just wanted to press you on what you think the levers are to help apprentices, to help SMEs. It's often quite administrative, but if there's more simple things or maybe change to the levy system, that might be the way forward.
I mean, I think it's got to be seen as a partnership. Yeah. That's the important thing, that, you know, it's, you can't have one without the other, and so the input from both the business as well as the education provider is vitally important. Now, yes, we need to make sure it's not an administrative burden, without a doubt. We want it as simple as possible, because quite often SMEs, like I was when I had my own business, you wear many hats. You know, you're the marketing person, you do the payroll, you do delivery, you do everything. So I think it's the time element which often puts people off. So I think quite a streamlined process. It might be quite an online form which makes it easy, and then the provider will work with you to then get this up and running very quickly. I think that's definitely an element. But also, like I said earlier, it's very much about the PR. I mean, businesses need to know what's in it for them, especially SMEs when they are struggling wearing these 10 different hats that they wear. So I think that by actually working on the PR and working closer with businesses, I think it's important, even at, like I said, local authority level, colleges as well, that we actually show that, you know, you as an engineering firm there, you know, when your people retire, who's going to replace them? Where are you going to find these skills, or the digital skills? I mean, you're completely right, Michaela. Even in the last 7 years, I've been an MP. I've heard it so many times from businesses that cannot get enough people with digital skills. And I mentioned, actually, sorry for taking up yesterday in my speech, young people actually now, I think they're going to demand so much more technically and digitally. I mean, my 5-year-old, he set up a YouTube channel. When he was 4, he made music videos, me drooling on my pillow asleep, added music to it. It's amazing. And maybe he can work for Google one day. But it's amazing, and so I think that, you know, we'll be letting these next generation down if we don't get up to speed with these digital skills. And we saw that in lockdown, for example, laptops, not enough laptops to go around to help those hard to reach families. Local authorities being slow at actually getting them out. So it's probably, I've over-answered your question.
It's very interconnected, right?
Yes,
You've got
absolutely.
two sides.
Yeah.
Rich, can I come to you on this question on how we improve the number of businesses, particularly SMEs, and help them to hire apprentices, whether that's levy reforms or something else?
I think it is levy reforms, but there's something I actually want to just press. I can just digress from momentarily, Andrew, on a bit. One of the things that I'm really keen on pushing for early years is, and perhaps for infants and primary education as well, the Department of Education probably transfers around 200 million quid back to the Treasury every year in its own apprenticeship levy funding. And I just wondered, in terms of perhaps upskilling teaching assistants, perhaps, and at other level, and at early years, some of those people as well. Is there any look at degree apprenticeships or route like that for teaching as well? Because actually, there's a lot of those small. They're quite small. You know, schools aren't necessarily massive as individual entities, and there's clearly a lot of expertise within them. Which could perhaps be used.
This is actually an area we've only discussed in the last 2 weeks, Richard.
Yeah.
I'm pleased to know.
I am very pleased to hear that. That's good.
Definitely.
Well, my Westminster Hall debate, I'm looking forward to answering it at some point in the not too distant future. No, but with small businesses, I think it is that the barriers are exactly as was talked about before. Actually, it's that bureaucracy. Even if you're going to pay something towards it, you know, a small nudge of an incentive goes a long way. Getting some. And so I just think that's what we just have to do something in that space. It's small incentive nudges. They want to do the right thing. All my small businesses in North West want to do the right thing. Absolutely. It's just, you know, they think, oh, there's a bureaucracy. We've got to pay something towards it. You know, a little bit of a grant goes a long way to helping them. And also, I think
or a helping hand. It's not always a grant, a helping hand through the process.
I think sometimes one of the difficulties with that is they just don't know where to turn. And good local colleges, like the one I've got in my patch, are really good at working with businesses on this. A lot of them will have worked with them on access to work schemes and all sorts of different stuff. And if they've got that trust there with them, they're more likely to. So it's about that, and just sometimes just the knowledge. Of what to do, because they are desperate as well. So many businesses in my patch are desperate for people to come in who they can actually train up, and we all know from apprentices they're more likely to stick with them if they've done an apprenticeship.
I have to, if this is okay, Chair, pick up on the point actually about the importance of that relationship with local colleges, because I mean, when I contacted one of our local colleges for my own apprentice in the office, we didn't get a response or even an email responded to, so we went with a private provider. And you know, that can be, you know, why is that happening? It'd be nice to visit that college now. Why did you ignore?
There are some excellent private providers out there.
I mean, there's amazing private providers. I mean, the company we've got is amazing. I had him at my recent jobs fair as well, and you know, there's the strengths to both of them, definitely. I mean, what I like about him, the local business, they really spend a lot of time and come into the office and spend a lot of time and spend time with ourselves as employers. So
it's just one of the small things. I think and this is changing, and you know what Multiverse and others are doing. It's incredible in this space, genuinely incredible in the space. But there is we can also look at that prestige point as well. And for some businesses, they want to see themselves as graduate employers almost, rather than. And I think there's a bit of an issue with that in certainly parts of the public sector, particularly. Where a graduate, well, actually, why? Well, why would you do that? You know, if Goldman Sachs or somebody else is doing this other thing with degree apprenticeships or apprenticeship routes, well, why aren't you? You know, it's almost a bit of backward thinking. It's like some elements of the public sector are still catching up in some ways.
So is it the name? I'm putting it out to all of you. Is it the name that's the problem, apprenticeship? Everybody knows what it is on the tin. Do we need to look at a name which is more inspiring?
I think there might need to be more than a name. But
yes.
There's,
no, obviously more than a name, but I'm just saying
it's a challenge as well. You know, you've had universities that have been around for hundreds of years. People know what a university education is, and there's a thing. there's a difference in just awareness as well. I'd like to come to some questions from the floor. I might do 2 at a time. We've got about 15 minutes. So I'll do this gentleman here, and then I'll do the person right at the back as well. And please say who you are.
Is it aimed
well.
at me, Sean?
It is. And it's Shane, by the way, not Sean.
Oh, yeah. Shane, I can find it.
It was Steve yesterday.
Oh,
and
Steve, it's Sean and it's Shane.
You get it right sometime, Minister. Shane Chow, I'm the editor at FE Week, we're a weekly
Okay.
newspaper covering the further education and skills sector. I do want to just press you, Minister, if I can, on the comments in the Chancellor's speech yesterday. Comes back to what you were just discussing. He said there are too many rules for small business owners who want to take on an apprenticeship. Clearly there are discussions going on in government, and I'm just wondering if you can give us some more info on, if not what the precise details are, but at least what the processes are, what the thinking is at the moment, because it's clearly for it to make the Chancellor's speech, it must be a big deal. And secondly, because I don't think I'm going to have another opportunity to at this conference, just wanted your reflections on the proposal that the Labour Party announced last week, where they said they would replace the Apprenticeship Levy with a skills and growth levy, which could be spent on apprenticeships, but also on other forms of training, which they say would be more flexible and meet the needs of businesses better than the current system.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And at the back.
Hello, I'm Vanessa Wilson, University of London. We met during the summer for the level 3 results. Thank you for the panel's discussion. Just a couple of points really, and then a question. So I represent professional technical universities across the UK, so the executive side. They already work hand in glove with the industry, so there are universities out there already doing an incredible job. And they all deliver degree apprenticeships. They'd love to deliver more degree apprenticeships, and it's an offer really, Andrea, that we were working with your predecessor. We think we've got lots of ideas for how we can get more degree apprenticeships, particularly aimed at SMEs. So it's an offer just to say we'd love to pick up the conversation with you. The other point I'd like to make is I think when we talk about degrees and people maybe making the wrong decisions, I don't think we should denigrate degrees and undergraduate degrees. I think possibly the real issue is around information, advice and guidance being available for young people when they're making those decisions. So, and I think the question is, what are we, and I think it ties with your point around degree apprenticeships and apprenticeships, is what are we going to do to improve that information, advice and guidance so young people, and indeed older people, make better decisions potentially that work in their favour.
Brilliant, thank you. So Minister, I'm going to go to you on this question of sort of regulation on SMEs and how we can make it easier. And then I might come to Donya on the question of a flexible skills levy and what that might look like, and then we can turn to you both as well.
Shane. I have to say I've had 2 hours sleep, 11 hours on my feet yesterday. I was so hyper, when you can't sleep with insomnia. So, but I'll always get your name wrong because I'm terrible at names as well. Look, I can't say what's going on, what discussions the Chancellor's having in his department. We do have bilateral meetings, the SOS and him, etc. But I haven't been party to those yet. But I know as a department, speaking to not only the civil servants but Kit and the rest of the team, we do want to unshackle businesses to be able to really take on more apprenticeships. So I'd say watch this space, because it's something I know it's cliche saying that, but it's something I know the SOS and myself are really passionate about, because it's vital. It's a no-brainer, this. We've got to make it easier for businesses to take on more apprenticeships. We've got to realise they know what's in it for them, and that there's an incentive to do so. So regarding your Labour Party, skills growth levy, it's going to be devil in the detail. I can't comment on that until I've obviously seen the fine detail. But it's always easy to come up with things when you're in opposition anyway. It's much harder when you're having to juggle all the purse strings, wars, pandemics at the same time. So.
Great, thanks. And Donya, can I come to you on this question of the flexible skills levy? You've worked with the apprenticeship levy and with employers. Do you think this is something that employers would welcome, or would it potentially add sort of more confusion to a system which actually people are only just starting to grapple with?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you just said. And the second part is that we think that there have been a lot of calls for flexibility, and that the Labour Party announced that they would announce a flexibility scheme. But as Andrea said, the devil's in the detail, and particularly we're worried about the regulation and the quality of those short courses, whatever they are, and we've got quite a robust quality mechanism and regulation scheme for apprenticeship qualifications, you know, where we're Ofsted inspected, etc. So I think there's important guardrails to put up when we're looking at short-term courses, and we need to make sure that these courses aren't used for things like inductions or health and you know, health training at work. Things that actually contribute to growth will be really important. And finally, I think a big part of Levy underspend goes to SMEs, directly to SMEs to do apprenticeship training. So we would want to see a commitment to SMEs getting the same amount of funding that they get under this scheme to ensure that they are able to grow.
Thank you, and I actually agree with a lot of your points. But Kyla, can I ask you this question again on the sort of levy and the reforms that might sort of help the system?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think it's so telling as well. Like, thank you, Richard, for coming and being on the panel at very short notice. I know it's been a particular passion of yours, and also to the new minister as well to come and, you know, right in and, you know, to have that you know, hit the ground running and to join us today. We would be delighted to work with you on how we can, you know, ourselves kind of in depth of how we've managed through the apprentices ourselves and meet some of our apprentices, but then also working on how we'd like to spend more of our apprenticeship levy.
I mean, I've mentioned it
how we can do that
several times at the conference so far, but I'm going to be having monthly stakeholder meetings where it's out the box thinking, looking at what a problem is and how can it be solved for people right across the industry. And so I can see you smiling once again.
Yes.
No, but isn't it better? Because to me, as I've said previously, the DFE doesn't have a monopoly on good ideas. Isn't it the right thing to actually engage everybody?
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
I wasn't in the post prior to 2 months ago, so give me a chance.
Richard, can I come to you on this question of degree apprenticeships and information? You've already touched on it a little bit, but if you'd like to come on that question.
Yeah, I think, first of all, Vanessa, I want to get in touch with you about Teesside University, because one of my local colleges is desperate to find a degree apprenticeship link up, so let's chat at the end. Secondly, I think you're being a bit generous sometimes on elements of undergraduate degrees. I think there are some fantastic undergraduate degrees out there, that's absolutely clear. One of the things that was also clear to me when I was in the Spalding DFE is that Ofsted ratings go from, you know, you've got 4 Ofsted ratings, 2 of which are basically acceptable and 2 of which are unacceptable. When degree courses are rated, everyone's a winner, everyone's rated gold, silver or bronze. I think the truth is there probably needs to be a bit more of a push in the sector, and the sector needs to be held to account a bit more, if I was to be totally honest.
Can I come in on that point?
Yeah,
because I've got the same views on this, Richard. But to me, it's actually outcomes of those courses, and we know that you know next year universities are meant to actually publish what the likely outcome for these individual courses, and I think that we need to do a lot more informing the students. I think UCAS can play a role on letting students also know, you know, this course, is it going to be value for money? Is it going to lead to a good economic outcome for you personally? I think we actually need to blow the lid off this and actually put all the information out there, because if students are going to be saddled with 30 grand of debt, they need to make sure it's 30 grand well spent. So we'll have to have a chat about this, Richard.
No, I think I'm delighted to hear, Minister, that things are progressing in this area. The one thing I would just wanted to say about prestige, and it was something that James cleverly said when he was briefly Secretary of State to me, of Education to me, when we were chatting a couple of months ago. And he said, we do have massive prestige courses in the UK, already essentially in vocational education. We've got some of the best medical training in the world, which is vocational courses. We have Sandhurst, which provides some, you know, which literally, you know, the world's royal families send their kids to get trained. Why don't we talk about that in the same way? Absolutely. You know, there is terrific vocational education out there, which is world leading and is prestigious. It's just, and thanks to actually what some of the companies have been doing here, that's now happening more broadly. But actually, we've got a great tradition of doing this here, which is a tradition which is at least as strong as some of our good universities. And so we should also be talking about in that context as well.
Brilliant, thank you. I will come to this gentleman here who's been waiting very patiently, and then this lady here as well.
Thank you. Nick Lakin from Kingfisher. So we own B&Q and Screwfix in this country. A lot, I agree with what the panel is saying there. A couple of observations. On the apprenticeship levy, you could sit there and brainstorm it further, but I think there's been an awful lot of feedback from business over the last 5 years or so about what's wrong with the levy. So I think it's almost like you just need to kind of sit down, grab all that feedback,
Yes.
and then really crank it through, rather than spend a lot of time brainstorming further on it.
Can I have your card when we leave?
Sure. Then specifically around tradespeople, so Screwfix serves the trade. There's been a drop between 5 and 30% in the number in trades over the last 3 years for a number of different reasons. We've done a large piece of research about tradespeople and what are the challenges and barriers to becoming an apprentice. There's 3 main things. Number one, there is definitely a point about funding and cost. There's just no way escaping that. If you're a small business, I think you already just said it as well, the confidence of taking on somebody else, and particularly in a more economically insecure environment, is a real barrier. It used to be £3,000 post-COVID, support for apprentices gone down to 1,000 again. So I know for speaking to tradespeople directly, that's a challenge. Second point is around connection, how to connect apprentices and tradespeople. They look in different places to find each other. So I think there's a role for government to help in that.
Yeah.
And then finally, there is absolutely a piece around the education scheme of the system and the role of DFE through careers advice and everything else in driving that. I do also think that given university costs, speaking as someone who's taken on someone in my team who's got 65 grand's worth of debt, I think universities will price themselves out of the market increasingly, so
Do you have a
apprenticeships
question?
become viable.
Is it a question or is it just a point?
There's
we can
a
discuss?
series of
Discussion point.
observations and an ask for kind of an encouragement to act pacily, please,
Yes.
in trying to driving these changes, because the clock is really ticking on this.
I used to work for the Kingfisher Group, by the way, for Comet. I was a store manager when you had Comet.
And we can compare notes on that.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the point around prestige, which has been made brilliantly by all the panel. What we're trying to do, sorry, I'm Emma Roberts from World Skills UK. What we try and do is use international best practice and international skills competitions to raise standards in technical education and apprenticeships right across the UK. And I think that's a great opportunity to show that there is prestige and there's real quality and world-class standards within the technical education sector. And ask the panel if they would get behind Team UK over the next couple of months, because we have 35 amazing young people who are going to be flying the flag for UK, competing internationally over the next couple of months in areas like digital skills, which are going to be vital for Google. And just today, 4 of our young people are in Germany competing in mechatronics and Industry 4, which is just an amazing opportunity. And what's more, when they come back to the UK, they are the role models that will inspire the next generation. So it'd be great to have the panel support.
brilliant. Minister, I'll let you come to Beth.
Can I have your card as well, Emma? I'm going to need a new handbag to carry all this in. I mean, I completely will be fully behind Team UK. Excited to have a chat about that, how I can get involved and promote it. I mean, the world skills side, I find it, you know, with your organisation. I mean, I think looking at best practice is so important. Through conversations today, I understand Germany is doing some amazing thing, and the way that they look at vocational and technical education is equally as important as the way they look at academia, and even the way that they have their colleges and universities. And even I understand they even get employers to sponsor degrees as well and training, which is amazing. So that so they can have a degree without having any debt. So I'd be interested to meet with you actually and you know, hear your views within your organisation. Who is doing a great job out there? What can we learn? How can we adapt to do something similar in the UK?
That's great. Gentleman at the back, and then the man here as well.
Good afternoon, my name is Martin Coles, Chief Executive of the Marine Society and Sea Cadets. The Marine Society is a college delivering education for seafarers. 2 years ago, we started delivering apprenticeships in line with Maritime 2050 in some of the fringe areas of commercial vessel skippers, workboat crew and port operatives.
Wow.
We have about 40. It's not big, but it's growing and there's massive demand. Our challenge is that we are being hit, or about to be hit, by the 75% maximum or minimum level of direct delivery that we need to do. And we've been expanding by working in partnership with other providers in order to deliver the full education. Now we can apply and we can get a short-term but can we please move to it being not 25%, but perhaps 50%, to enable that sort of flexibility, so that we can really deliver for the people in that sector.
Great, thank you. And question here.
David Barker, Association of Apprentices. So we were founded in 2019 to tackle a serious problem, which is the number of young people that drop out of apprenticeships. It was about a third when we were starting, that's nearly a half. The number one reason that's been researched why is not having enough support during their apprenticeship. So we've been created to augment more support in partnership with employers and providers. I guess the question is, what more could we do in partnership to scale up that kind of support? Because if we do want to accelerate how many apprentices there are, we've got to accelerate how much support there is available as well.
Great question. Michaela, I'll come to you on these two questions and then we'll go to the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think going back to that kind of prestige point, I think for us at Google, we see having our apprentices as a prestige for us and within our workforce. And when we do come to North West Durham and do a Google Garage, you will get to meet Callum, who's one of our apprentices who will have been promoting the event on our behalf. And in terms of thinking about how we looking at whether we know that we're doing a good apprenticeship program is in two indicators. One of them being, do the apprentices continue and do they complete? And the other being, where do they then go on to? And both of those numbers are in the very high 90s, which we kind of use as that. And then I thought I hadn't mentioned previously, but in terms of looking at us within Europe, Google UK's apprenticeship program, it's the largest apprenticeship program that Google offers within Europe, so and it's the third largest within the world. So we really are. And there's a lot of work to be done. Very happy to work in partnership with the government, but I think perhaps to kind of see that we know that apprentices work here, and we know that it does have the backing of the government department as well.
Great, thank you. And one final word. We're very low on time, but if you want to come back on these questions. And then we'll wrap up.
I just wanted to make one point about something else, but go to this first.
Okay, Donya, these two questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, unfortunately, we don't have a view on the Marine Society particular issue, so I am sorry I won't be able to answer that one. But in terms of the support and when it comes to retention, we see at Multiverse we've got over a 90% retention rate, which we're quite proud of. And I think the big reason for that is exactly right in terms of support and sort of the one-to-one coaching support that our apprentices receive. But a big portion of it is that we think that the apprenticeships are in an ecosystem, so working with the apprentice, their line manager or their apprentice manager and their wider people and their employers is incredibly important. So one of the things that we do is we really take a long time to measure from very early on apprentice engagement, their manager's engagement, the employer's engagement. And if we see that those engagement numbers are dipping below a certain level, then our coaches are empowered to go into those organizations and speak to people to say, what's the issue? Is there a particular problem that you might be having? How can we fix it? And I think that's what's led us to have really successful retention rate. And what's more is that we've been able to scale it as well, and that's a big part of that is just by data and being able to collect, evaluate, and sort of look at all this data in a repeated way.
Great, thank you. And final word to you, Minister, on these questions.
Okay, Marine Society. I mean, my grandfather was a fisherman in Hull, so anything to do with the seas is important to me. But I can't answer your question. I don't know enough about your industry specific at the moment, but I will get back to you on this. I will get the department to give me a briefing and get some stats on this and see how we can support with that. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. How do we ensure that young people stick with apprenticeships? Because proof's in the pudding. Everybody on this panel agrees it really helps with social mobility and life chances of that person. So I think again, it's going to be collective working, government, local government, businesses, and those in education to run this.
I just want to make one broad point, and I don't want to directly turn this into something which is really past political, but the entire sector and apprenticeships have come a long way in the last few years, and the prestige of them has been basically one of the big driving factors behind it. I am very concerned about the idea that would water down the Apprenticeships Levy towards essentially what was there once before, which was level 1 training for supermarkets and that sort of thing, which just was not what it was there for. It was there to upskill people and to provide progression for the future, and particularly to provide routes up. And I can understand why you might want to look at it in flexible different ways, but I really think that we need to ensure the levy is focused on things which drive productivity in the UK economy.
We're not going to change it,
No,
but I think it
no,
is tweaking, definitely.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
It's just the sort of Labour proposal, which was mentioned by
definitely.
somebody in the room. I think we just need to be very careful in that space.
Completely.
Great. I think we might have ended on a little bit of consensus, but it's clear there's an enormous amount to do here, and Onward is doing a lot of work in this space, and look forward to working with all of you. And just want to say thank you so much to Michaela, Richard, Donia, and Minister Andrea for giving up your time, and Google and Multiverse as well for working with us on this stuff.